Hello and welcome to the very first episode of The Apiary, a brand new knitting podcast. If we haven't met yet, hi, I'm Lauren Rad. I design knitting patterns, primarily socks, but also lots of other accessories. I love shawls and cowls and fingerless mitts and whatever else I can design that isn't a full-on sweater, because those make my head hurt. The plan here is to give you a mix of all sorts of different episode types coming up over the next several months. We're going to have some whips and FOs, we're going to have some commentary on things happening in the knitting community, and we're going to have some in-depth tutorials. So there's going to be a whole range of stuff here, no matter what it is that you're interested in. I am planning to dump a few episodes kind of all together early on just to get my own momentum going, but the plan is to settle into a rhythm of about an episode a week, sometimes a little more, sometimes a little less, because life happens. And since this is the very first episode, I thought I'd start with a fairly traditional format. We're going to take a look at some works in progress and some recently finished objects that I'm excited to share with you. So the first recently finished project I'm excited to show you is this little cutie patootie. This is a flag bunting. The flags kind of move around, they're adjustable, that I did using some minis from last year's Bad Sheep Yarn advent calendar. The reason that I did this one the way I did it is because I wanted to be able to add more triangles onto it and rearrange the triangles. Once it is hanging, the triangles don't move around nearly as much, but you can see right now they're quite movable. I just took the I-cord here that I made, and I threaded it through the corner of each little triangle, so you can see right there, and then it scoots along. So I can rearrange the order, I can change out the colors if I have like a themed event coming up and I need different colored triangles on it, but some of the triangles work and others don't. It makes it very flexible. Normally this is hanging above the window in my design studio, and so the curtains also help kind of keep the little triangles in place and keep them from slipping and sliding around. This one is a free tutorial up on my blog, and the great thing about it is you start knitting at the bottom point here of this triangle, and then you knit outward using increases. What that does is that gives you a whole ton of flexibility. You can use any yarn and any size needles at whatever gauge you like. You might want to swatch a little bit and figure out what gauge you think is the best for your needles and your yarn. But then once you get to that point, when you know which gauge you like, you know which yarn you want to use, you just cast on at the point and start expanding outward until you get the size triangle that you want. You are not locked into a particular size, a particular gauge, particular needles, none of that. So this is extremely flexible. I will drop the link to the free tutorial down in the description below. The next recently finished object that I am super excited to share with you all is this cutie patootie right here. This is a reworked version of my very early design, the Kelp forest cowl. This was maybe my second or third pattern I ever published 7 years ago. And so it was due for an update. It needed some adjustments. The pattern needed to be brought up to my current pattern writing standards. This yarn is the Sea Change Fibers Swale Fingering, which is an 80% wool, 20% cashmere blend, and it is so luxurious. This is next to skin soft. It feels wonderful. I knit it with 2 strands held double, but I only used 1 skein. So basically I took the skein, I balled it up halfway, and then I took the other half and put it into a second ball and held it double to knit this cowl. It did use every single bit of that skein of yarn. So if you are not the kind who likes to play yarn chicken, you might want to get a second skein. But if you're like me and like to live life on the edge, you could go for it. I had a lot of fun revisiting this pattern because, again, it was such an early design, and my pattern writing skills and style have changed so much in the intervening years. I did end up making a substantive change to it. It used to be that these cables here had 2 crosses before it went back out into the diamond and then back in. I decided to go with just 1 cross there. It made it a little more intuitive of a knit, and that's one of the things that is one of my priorities as a designer. I really want my knits to be something that you can memorize comfortably and then not really have to think about while you're working on them. So this one is definitely, once you settle into the rhythm of this guy, it's super intuitive and really easy to work with. And finally, the last FO that I want to show you that I'm just so proud of is a beast of a project. It took me 3 years to finish. It took me 213-ish hours with all the squares and the weaving in the ends, but it's this bad boy right here. It is the Mitered Square Blanket of Doom. That is a monster blanket, and I love it so much. It's over 4 pounds of yarn. It's 1,800 grams, and it was the best leftover project I have ever had. I knit this entirely with leftovers from all of my various sock projects over the years, and I learned a lot of lessons along the way. I will probably do a more in-depth video about the Mitered Square Blanket, including a step-by-step tutorial so that you can knit your own as well. But I love this. I love this thing so much. I finished it a couple weeks ago and I have not been able to put it down. So it is a massive undertaking. I will say this is not something that you're going to cast on and then finish in a couple of months, most of us. This is something that you need to be prepared for it to kind of hum along in the background and you'll do a square here and there and then put it down and pick it back up again and do a square here and there. And it's going to take a while, especially if you are using up leftovers and you are maybe generating leftovers as you work on the blanket, which I did. It's interesting. If you go from, is this the cast on edge? Yes, this is the edge where I started it. And then if you move along, you can see there's actually a little bit of a shift in the color palette as I added other leftovers. The blanket changed a little bit. It didn't change completely because, again, the holding the yarns double, which is what I did. I held 2 strands of fingering weight yarn together, helped create not quite a full-on fade effect, but it helped blend everything together really well. So there was nothing that was really super stark that was different from one end to the other, but there is a little bit of a shift as I added in other yarns and ran out of yarns that I started with. Anyway, this blanket is just one of my greatest treasures. If the house were on fire, this is one of the things I would grab after I made sure that everybody was safe. And I cherish it. And I really encourage you to knit one too if you would like to knit one. Let's take a look at some of the stuff that is in progress right now. So one of the things I'm really excited about is this cutie patootie right here. This is a worsted weight slipper sock that I'm designing for something coming up in February. So this will be released on the blog in February. Keep an eye out for it. I love that it has these cute little lace panels down the front and some little swirly cables. It's going to be really fun. It's going to be relatively easy because it is worsted weight, and the back is stockinette. So again, you don't have to worry about too much complexity there. And the lace, again, remember, you know me, I like things to be memorizable. So the lace is very, very simple. This is a really simple lace repeat that's going to be very easy for you to memorize. I'm knitting this one with Knit Picks Wool of the Andes Worsted because I love a good budget yarn. And this one is knitting up really beautifully. It's got a nice heathered color to it. I like how you can kind of see the little bits of variation in it, but it's not, here, I'm gonna hold that closer so you can kind of see. That's making that a little tricky, but you can hopefully see some of the heathering in there. It's very pretty. It's a really pretty yarn, and I think it is complementing the stitch pattern really nicely. For those of you who have been hanging around here a while, look at that. That's magic loop right there. I am magic looping that guy. It turns out I do really like magic loop for knitting at a tight gauge because the tiny circulars are a little tricksy to hold in the hands, even with my tiny little hands. And I find that when I combine that with a tight gauge, I do start getting a little bit of hand pain. But with the magic loop, that is not a problem. I have a little bit more grippiness there. I am still knitting this one at a time, but wait till I show you my next whip. So here's my next whip. And yes, I am also knitting magic loop on these, and I am doing it 2 at a time. And there's a reason for that. I am knitting these mittens out of scraps from 2 previous projects. So the pink is from a dyer who unfortunately is no longer dyeing, but you might recognize those soft green stripes. Yeah, that is the swale fingering left over from the Kelp Forest cowl. It's such a beautiful yarn that I didn't want to let any little bit of it go to waste. And I had maybe 6 grams of it left. Yeah, I had 6 grams left, and I did not want to let any of it go to waste. So just the teensiest bit of yarn, but look, it's perfect. And I'm gonna add another light green stripe kind of right up here before I start closing off the mittens. So this one I am knitting magic loop 2 at a time because I want the lines to be perfectly placed, perfectly matching on each mitten without my having to sit there and count rows, because counting rows is agony. I hate having to count rows. And that's part of why, if you look closely at all of my sock designs, there's always some sort of little indicator for where you are in your repeats, even if it is like a purl stitch every other row. And so you can count and be like, oh, I have 6 pearls. It's time to do the next cable. Because I hate having to count rows. I hate having to keep track of how many rows I've knit. So when I'm doing something like this, which is a big stockinette project, I still don't want to have to count the rows. So here I am doing magic loop 2 at a time mittens so that I can avoid having to count rows. It's also helpful because I am doing these with scraps and I want to be able to use up every last bit of yarn that I can. And I think I'm going to be cutting it a little close with this one. So if I do them 2 at a time, I don't have to worry about running out of yarn before I have finished the second mitten. If I do run out of yarn, I can just frog them both back, pop them back on the needles, and carry on, and it's fine. Now, I don't currently have any plans to turn this into a published pattern. These are kind of just for me because my hands get cold on my morning walks. But if you really want it to be a pattern, let me know. I can write it up and put it on the blog at some point. And then my last whip for today, or at least the last one I can show you, is a project that I fear might actually be cursed. This is my 3rd, yes, you heard me right, my 3rd sample of the berry scone shawl. I accidentally felted the first sample. Oops, my bad. And then I left the second sample on a plane after an 11-hour international flight where I didn't really sleep. Oops, my bad. So I'm knitting a third sample. I swear this is the last time I'm knitting a sample for this pattern. If I have to knit a fourth sample, I will just not do it. So this is Bad Sheep yarn, again, fingering weight yarn in the colorway Celeste. It is the prettiest kind of slightly purpley light blue with the occasional dark blue speckle in it that just gives it a little bit of interest. And it is super squishy. I love this yarn. I work with Bad Sheep Yarn a lot. They're a great yarn company to work with, and I like their yarn, and they've got a huge range of colorways. So whether you're like me and you tend to prefer soft pastels, or you tend to prefer, really bright and vibrant colors, there's something for you there. So this shawl starts from the point. It's an asymmetrical triangle shawl, and it grows outward. This is a whole bunch of seed stitch here. So if you're like me and you like knitting seed stitch, welcome, you're gonna like this shawl. And then it has this lovely band of teeny tiny little crocheted baubles. I don't know if you can see those itty bitty baubles there. And then lacy leaves, and then more teeny baubles and more lacy leaves and more teeny baubles and more lacy leaves until we get out to the end of the shawl. So the next portion of the shawl is going to be a lot of texture. It's going to move much more slowly than the seed stitch section did, but hopefully I will have this finished for you soon, because I would really love to include this in an upcoming finished object update. And when I am done with it, it's not leaving the house. It is never leaving the house. This will be a shawl that I wear at home when I'm working in my office and it's cold, or I'm knitting on the couch, or I'm reading a book in bed, but this thing is not leaving the house. Right then, that's it for today's update. Thanks for being here. I'm really excited to get started with this. This is a project, this YouTube channel, that I have literally been planning for 2 years and have just been dragging my feet on. But I decided this year was the year it's gonna happen. No more excuses. Let me know if there's anything in particular that you wanna see or hear from me, and I look forward to chatting with you. Happy stitching.